Are you a B2B company that uses podcasts to grow your company's revenue? Well, if so, you are invited to the B2B Pod Con. It is the premier podcast conference in the B2B space. It will take place November 11th through 13th in downtown Nashville, Tennessee. Just a short walk from some of the best music and food you'll find anywhere. Learn from some of the best in the industry and connect with hundreds of your peers. Tickets are on sale with early bird pricing going through August 9th. After August 9th, the price is going to go up, so don't miss out on the best prices you will see before the event. Go to b2bpodcon.com, get your tickets. Information's in the show notes, b2bpodcon.com.
I think it's actually so important to, before you even consider your strategy, to think about your process, because you want to make sure that the second you have that idea that's going to, do the next best thing for your business, that you're able to implement it. I think that is honestly a big mistake that a lot of people do. They worry about the process after, and it becomes a hindrance to the level of production and productivity that you can take on your show. And I really feel like these tools and some of these systems that you may have in place, they're meant to be there for you so you can focus on what really matters at the end of the day, which is the strategy, the growth, and the overall audience connection that you want to have.
Welcome to It's Marketing's Fault, the podcast where we discuss how to do marketing the right way. I'm your host, Eric Rutherford, and I'm excited today because I have with me Rita Richa. She is the founder and executive producer of Reignite Media. She is a B2B podcast coach. She's the host of the Bippity Boppity Business podcast. And I am excited to say she is also going to be one of our guest speakers at this year's B2B Pod Con. It is a business-to-business podcast conference taking place in Nashville, Tennessee this November 11th through the 13th. Information is in the show notes. Rita, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate it. Try saying that Bippity Boppity Business 5 times straight.
Oh, no. I practiced a little bit, and I'm like, we're just going to have to go slow, and we'll survive. But slow and steady wins on that one.
Well, it's so true. But I really appreciate being on the show. I'm really looking forward to talking about podcasting and ways that we can bring value to your audience, and then sprinkle in a little bit of my own podcast fairy godmotherness into the mix somehow if we can.
I love it. I'm excited. So let's just kind of start with a fun question, because you and I had talked before this episode, and we were talking about musical theater and some of your background. So how does that background in musical theater really give people an advantage in marketing and the B2B space?
Yeah, so thank you so much for that question. When it comes to how my background in musical theater and performing arts plays an advantage within B2B and podcasting as a whole, it's a very unconventional way. But what it does is, when I was learning to be on stage and sing and act and all of those things that comes with it back in college, what we learned is that we are really trying to create some sort of connection with our audience. So when we're on stage, we're not just being a character or telling a story for the sake of story. We're trying to make the audience feel something. And as a concept, that's something that I've carried into the work I do now. So for example, in the musical Hamilton, there was some, fun work we did on that in college. We talked about not just singing the lyrics, but really trying to convey them with tone, or with, certain emphasis on certain words, and eye contact and body language, and all of those things that create presence are also subconscious things that are a, bid for connection or welcome connection with the audience, right? So what I found is that even though those things were on stage back then, now when I'm working with my podcast hosts, I find that some of those things are still very much present on camera. And when we're trying to have a conversation, when we are trying to tell a story, having certain inflections in our voice or presence and how we act, there they're all very much conveyed through video. And for those that started podcasting audio only, it's a little bit of jarring transition to add video into the mix and then have to consider some of those things that once before you didn't necessarily have to consider. So my favorite thing to do is to work with very intelligent leaders and executives within the B2B world that are definitely experts in their craft and knowledgeable, but didn't have the same background or knowledge as me. They weren't born to be on stage, but I helped them get there and at least have a brand presence or, just for themselves that they feel comfortable with, that welcomes that connection rather than shutting it down.
And that's an excellent point because so I started with audio podcasts. So I
Yes.
respect that. But the moment you do add video, suddenly it changes perspective. Suddenly posture matters. Suddenly you can't just sit there like,
You
just
can't be like, hey,
I know.
what you doing? You have to like be on camera. You have to be on in a way, right?
And you can't it's not, I can't turn my camera off. I can't just have this conversation. Like I have to be engaged.
Present.
I do. I have to be engaged, not only with you, but like to know because other people hopefully are going to watch it. I at least want to use the video so it doesn't look, like, man, why would I watch that? It looks like he's like a dead fish. I don't know. You just
right.
But
well, I always tell my hosts, sometimes it's not what you say, but it's how you say it. So I could sit here and be like, I ordered a pizza yesterday. I could say that with 7 different tones or 7 different presentations, and you might get something different out of it if I say it every time, So it's just like a small analogy that I like to explain because, there's a lot of subconscious processing through body language. And within the first few seconds of being on camera, your potential audience or fan, they are deciding whether or not they like you, because you're making that impression on them. So yes, it is important.
It is. And I love how you describe both the story aspect, because I want to touch on that here in a second, especially in the B2B world, which those two things sound very foreign to one another in a lot of respects. But just even on the inflection and the presence and how that builds trust, that draws you in or pushes you away. Is it, as you coach these business leaders, is that something they're aware of, they're not aware of? Are they open to sort of that guidance? I'd love to hear what you've experienced.
Absolutely. So most of the time, we are not aware of how our speech or how we are conveying the words that we are saying on camera can differ from a natural, organic, everyday conversation at the water cooler, right? So it's not something that comes naturally, but once I start to bring it up, it requires practice. So we'll do a lot of practice recordings where, most importantly, starting with a script is the best place to start. So I'm not expecting to work with someone in B2B and tell them, all right, tomorrow you're going to be like SNL, you're going to be, you're making a skit, this is you. They're going to look at me like I have 3 heads if I say that. So usually what we do is we take some type of copy that's already approved, like something that's already trying to be promoted out into the world. We take a small chunk of it and we try to record it. And I always suggest to not overwhelm yourself, to make the goal of 1-minute video. So try to start with a 1-minute video and be consistent and practice in those smaller increments rather than overwhelming yourself with a 15-20 minute script, because you're not going to feel the gains of the progress that way right away. And you're going to be overwhelmed because it's a lot to consider. So 1-minute little scripts, recording them. And then what I'll do is we'll kind of highlight certain parts of the script or bold certain parts of the script on Google Docs that need a certain type of instruction or direction. So pause here or read slower. Something that I am really bad at is in my everyday conversations, I am a very fast speaker. So when I am on an interview or when I am speaking, or I meet leaders that are just as excitable as I am, I'm really trying to say, okay, even though it feels like you're talking in slow motion right now, you're actually speaking in a normal speaking tone for someone to be able to not just hear what you're saying, but process what you're saying. And that's the most important part, is being able to truly like absorb the message that's being portrayed. Because what if you say something important and it was supposed to be this big moment for your listener, and you're already on to the next two, three things.
And as you do that, then the more you do it, the more you realize, okay, maybe I should repeat this, because as I said it, maybe it even sounded more important than when I, put the script together. And so, but it's the repetitions, right? It's like the more you do it, the more comfortable, and then you can begin to make adjustments either on the fly or part of the script, but you become more aware. But until you do it, you don't know.
Exactly. And I always recommend to read your scripts even before you record, because sometimes how we think we want to say things doesn't come out as naturally as when we say them. For example, playful jest of my show, Bippity Boppity Business looks great on paper, but when I say it, sometimes it's kind of hard to say for some folks. So it's just a small playful example to poke fun at myself, but a relevant example for other natural types of speaking. For example, there was a word I was working on in a script the other day with a client that was gamify. And for some reason, there was gamify beginning. There was all these like goes in the sentence or whatever. So what you're trying to do is mitigate the amount that when you are recording, how many takes you're going to have to take by making it simple. And I think that's the biggest takeaway is simplify what you're saying, simplify your script. It may feel dumbed down, but if you are saying it with authenticity and you are conveying it with your full persona and self, it's going to have more impact than some of these more Webstery like acronym type words that you hear in a conversation. So
yeah, it's really, you get more credibility if it's understandable. Like it's that trust, that whole level. And I totally get the whole wording thing. I was doing a short last week trying to promote a podcast conference coming up this fall. And so for everybody listening, it's the B2B Pod Con. And I think it took me 6, 7. Anyway, I was recording. It was like 7 attempts to get the web address out, which is b2bpodcon.com. And I saved the reel because I'm going to, I'll do an outtakes later on, because it was just like, I couldn't get it right to save me. I had to pause. I just kept, film was still rolling. And
but I think it's good to be vulnerable and honest about that, because I think many people who record, they feel that, oh, I've done more than 2 takes, I'm just bad at this. But the truth is, it's going to take a lot of takes. Even I watched the show, you've probably heard of the show Friends. Well, there was a really funny advertisement that 2 of the characters did for NBC, and it was 30 seconds long. It was straight up a 30-second long, like, hey, you're watching NBC and this is Friends. I'm so-and-so, like, enjoy, whatever. And the reel I watched is 45 minutes of them laughing and messing it up. And it was like a 30-second, like, very basic advertisement. So all that to say, it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to do multiple reps, but just keep going. And if you have a great editor, they should be able to take the best of those takes and make it feel cohesive and like it was one take. But if you are making mistakes, pause in between so that the editor that you are working with has the opportunity to do so.
That's an excellent point, because if you're the one who has not recorded, even if you did record it, like, but especially if you didn't, you don't know what's the good one. Like, you watch all of it and then it's like, okay, there were 5 takes there, and I think the last one was the good one. What do we chop out? Yeah, a pause helps out tremendously. Just a public service announcement for all those out there who have never edited stuff, or make notes, like both. Awesome.
Both. We need both. We love both.
That is true. So Reignite Media. So what is it? What was the moment where it's like, I just got to start this thing?
Yes. So Reignite Media is kind of an umbrella encompassing a few of the things that I do within my life. But I would say that the first and foremost is we do offer full service production. So what I mean by that is all the way from the ideation and strategy of a brand new podcast. What does that look like? How are we going to fit that into your entire marketing plan and make it something that hopefully you enjoy and you have fun doing, want to continue doing as well, which is a very important thing. And all the way from that to the implementation and the ongoing production from video, audio, repurposing content, etc. So that was the very rudimentary version of what I'm doing in the grand scheme of podcast land, right? But that is a full service thing that we offer, and we have clients for that. I did recently start a Done With You program. So if you are someone who's more of a solopreneur within the B2B space, or maybe you are actually creating content for one of these brands and you're the editor and you're the audio engineer or whatever it is, right? Offering one-on-one coaching and strategy and more of a consulting partner collaborative based approach is something that I love to do, because not everyone wants the full service. Maybe you have your own editor, and that's okay. I actually good on you. Love that. Like, I love to work on the nuts and bolts of what's the psychology of your episode. Like, if somebody listens to it and I am a potential customer rather, and I want to become an audience member, like, how are we going to truly bring that person in and turn them from just somebody who's found you once or twice to becoming like an avid follower? And we do that through breaking down and reigniting how you might have been thinking about your content before, to trying to create experiences through your content. So what we're doing right now, this is a live stream, but I would call this an experience. We are talking to each other, and if somebody were to hop on and watch us, they're having an experience now as well too. And that's a little bit of the Disney side of things. I love obviously the parks and everything, but just how are they able, the question came to mind, how are they able to take somebody that just wanted to go for a ride in a theme park and go on a roller coaster and make them feel something, versus some other amusement parks where there are just roller coaster rides and whatever, like Hershey's or Dollyland or whatever, all these like amusement parks. Like, what's the difference? And the difference is emotion. There's something that goes deeper than what I'm saying. It's appealing to that audience or that customer. And how are we going to really narrow down that message and make your content feel like a curated collective of emphasis of that message, rather than one-off type interviews? Because the thing is that Disney does really well is branding and consistency in their messaging. So I think a mistake that some new podcasters can make, even especially in B2B, is every episode feels like it's something entirely separate from each other. Like, if I looked back and I stood back and I looked at a library, your books wouldn't be on the same shelf. They'd all be on different shelves. We want to walk back and see like the collection, right? Like, if I'm looking at all of the content related to, for example, The Little Mermaid, right? Like, it all looks the same, feels the same. There's some type of, element to it where I can look at it or hear something from it for 2 seconds or 3 seconds and go, yes, that's The Little Mermaid. I know what that is, right? So that's an analogy. But when I'm listening to all these interviews that we have, because let's be honest, podcasting has become a very common thing. It's not as disruptive as it used to be. What's going to make somebody want to listen to you for 45 minutes straight? I think that it's the retention side of like, not just creating it, but how are we going to bring that into the focus and into the fold? So that's a very long summary of both, but essentially, layman's terms, I'm your podcast fairy godmother. Whether you want to edit it yourself or you want me to do it, I work with you to make your content dreams come true. We'll figure it out.
I love that. I love that. But it is important though, because you want it. There is something with a consistency. That's why, and I'd want to say formulaic, but I mean, some things formulaic. I mean, I think of the Hallmark Channel, and I think of all the Hallmark movies, and the reason
Food Channel, HGTV, the producers that they have a formula. They do.
It's a formula, and then they tell a story every time, and that's something I know you mentioned earlier on. It's you're having an experience with a story to bring people in. So, what do people understand that they can tell stories in a B2B world?
No. They don't. And that's a very abrupt answer, but let me explain. I have a very easy, just quick story to tell you to explain. So really, there are news headlines that happen all the time in these big types of companies. Like, they're acquiring a new brand, or they're having a merger, or they've launched a new product. And instead of making a story out of those things and focusing on the people that made that thing come to life, they're focusing on the actual thing itself, preventing the possibility of any type of emotional connection to occur, right? So there was one podcast I was hosting it was B2B Tech Talk. It was for Ingram Micro, which is a partner of Cisco or some type of fancy umbrella like that. We won't get too into it. Long story short, they came to me and they said, hey, we have 3 executives that have come together, and we have a merger that happened for the business, and we want you to make a podcast episode about that. And I was like, how the heck am I going to make a 30-minute podcast episode simply talking about 3 companies that merged? Like, in my brain, on surface level, you might look at that and go, that's not a very exciting podcast episode. What are we going to talk about? Like the meetings that they had, the thought process behind it, like whatever, right? So I took it a layer deeper, and of course, the Disney side of my brain had to pop up. And I considered that potentially these 3 individuals are maybe the Avengers of their industry. They're very big key players in their industry. And they all came together and they merged, but then they created this new, like, crazy product that no one's ever seen before that's super strong. Okay, they just created the vibranium of their industry. Great. So when I pitched the episode to these gentlemen, these executives, I was a little nervous because I was like, let's have some fun. So when I read your bio, I'm going to pretend like it's your origin story, like you're a superhero, right? And your sidekick is this other company that had a little less involvement in the merger but was still important in it. And we're going to have the same conversation, but we're just going to have a theme around the conversation. And then eventually, about 15 minutes in, we'll mellow it out and have the conversation that you wanted to have. But let's start exciting. And that's an easy example that I have is, I was not met with complete like, yes, Rita, that's a great idea. Let's do that when I presented that idea. But once I actually talked to those involved in the episode, they were all excited. And one of them even said, yeah, I actually really like the Avengers and superheroes or whatever. You know what I mean? So that's the funny thing is in B2B, we forget the human side to the work that we're doing. We focus very much on just the work and forget that in order for us to have a human connection, we have to talk about something other than the product or the service that you have so that I can connect to you as a person. If my podcasts were called SaaS Sports and we talked about, sports and like data analytics and whatever and all this stuff, and I had a software for that, people probably wouldn't bat their eyes as much. Could be like, oh yeah, sports is cool. Like I can connect to that or whatever. So it's the same thing. It's just a formula, like taking whatever content that you want to have and finding some type of human relatable element that doesn't require tons of brain power to discuss, so that there's just a casual element to what you're doing too.
Well, and I think that sometimes too, it's like everybody gets stuck in almost like this executive tone, like everything
Yes.
has to be serious and it has to
Like
sound
this.
legalese. Yeah, it's
Yes.
like
Yes.
you can have a little fun. Like your
Yes.
stockholders aren't going to like freak out if you
Yeah.
crack a joke. Like it's okay.
Yeah. It's like that's exactly the point, and that's the funny thing about what tying back to what you said earlier. They don't know it's okay. It's not a known thing, especially with LinkedIn. LinkedIn itself, I post a lot of content on there, and I encourage a lot of the people I work with to promote their content and their show there as well. Just now, we're starting to see people being a little more comfortable to talk about deeper things than just excited for my new opportunity or excited for this or, I am looking for that or whatever, right? So at the end of the day, I learned this from any Disney movie I watched, like and I really thought deep about it. What was it about me watching a movie when I was 5 years old that I can still recite lines from that movie 10 years later? And it was that the movie made me feel something. Feel something, anything, happiness, sadness, joy, frustration, anger, resentment, contempt, excitement, anything. If you are creating content and listening to it yourself and going, ugh, don't post it. Someone else is also going to probably feel the same way. So yeah, that's just my little soapbox moment for that.
But I appreciate that. I've worked at enterprise level companies, and they're the most boring places to be
Yes.
ever. Like
Yes.
ever.
Ever.
It's hard, and
Yeah.
because the idea of fun, the idea of excitement, and then the excitement is not excitement. Like usually what happens, like what they think is exciting is like, no,
No.
no.
Right.
And so, but I like how you talked about how things are changing. How do you see, like, even in the last 3 to 4 years, how is this B2B, especially B2B podcast landscape changing? Because we are on the move in a direction. How have you seen that really change?
Yeah, well, obviously, the first change that I'm sure you agree with me on is video becoming even more dominant than ever before. In B2C and traditional media, that's just been a known thing. But with B2B, you are seeing the rise of also influencers as well within the space. And I think that's going to be a really positive thing because the companies that maybe are a little more afraid of hosting their own shows and being a little less serious might be able to partner with a creator who could host the show on their behalf, that could wear the jester's hat for them if they really think it's that silly, or actually be the voice of the brand. Another thing too is we're seeing a lot more of the live streaming being popular as well too, and I think that's really exciting for me personally because really the whole point of having these in-depth conversations is to hopefully engage with somebody and continue the conversation. And I'm really excited to see how that changes. Something on the more, interesting side of what's changing is we're starting to see a lot of copycats though of each other. And that may not be a positive change if you look at it on a surface level. Everyone seems to have a podcast now. But if you actually think that way, you're probably not going to ever start one. But if you flip your mindset and think, oh, this is an opportunity for me to make a really out there podcast that's going to look different from the rest, now I have a chance to disrupt the market and stand out. So it's no longer just about, are podcasts allowed? Are they accepted? It's, okay, where can we really take this to the next level and really make an impact? And lastly, something that I've done before with people is in-person content, like activations at conferences. We're seeing a lot more people at conferences wanting to make content and posting content there and partnering and collaborating with other people there. And I think in whatever way you do that, whether it's a podcast or little videos or whatever the heck it is, there's a huge opportunity as events are even more predominant than ever and coming back full swing. Which plug, I'm very excited to record some content at the B2B Podcast Convention, which I'm very excited to be speaking at as well, and to show all of you how cool it can be.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's actually something, I mean, because part of our earlier conversation, we had talked a little bit about the conference and when it was in the idea phase, and it's still, we're still building it out for everybody listening. But the idea of having an area where people can come in and record live. And I thought that was brilliant. So if, for everybody, tickets go on sale July 24th and best price of the whole season, like right around then. But we're going to have a place where you can set up shop and do live interviews, do live video, do live audio, just be on site, on set, and really just, because those are the places where you can have conversations in person with people you will never get to have conversations with in person otherwise.
Yes, 100%. And I think that's really one of the more positive changes that we're seeing with the space. Another change too is, man, there's so much AI out there. And Eric, you as the processes and systems specialist, I'm sure there are so many ways that you may have been working on your content that the way you used to edit and organize and whatever, implement your system 4 years ago is completely different now. There are so many more tools that you can use. And that's exciting because it will hopefully lift the burden a bit of that process.
Oh yeah, it really is. It's fascinating. The more, like, just the different conversations I have with people, suddenly where before I would say like that podcast audio was the foundation piece. And I still believe that. I believe that
Right.
you can take that and build everything from it. But
Mhm.
now, like even being able to take text and flip it into audio, being able to repurpose it basically backwards is a really interesting idea. What you can now do with the transcripts is so much easier to process than 4 or 5 years ago when you're like, this is going to take me hours.
Yes. One great example I'd like to share is, for example, multi-camera editing is a very involved process. And Adobe even, there are some ways to expedite that, but it's still a little bit cumbersome. Just the other day, I used Descript for multicam editing, and it automatically switched the camera angles for me. It probably saved about 2 hours of editing time. So you can have three camera angles, press a button, go grab some coffee, and come back, and it's done most of the heavy lifting for you.
Wow. Yeah, because the multi-camera thing is it because and that's something I like. I've been using Premiere for like a year and a half, just
Yes.
because of video, because it's like
Right.
I've got to learn how to manage video, and there are some great things with it, but there are a couple of things just like that are like, wow, it'd be nice just to have it magically happen.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and so yeah, there are a lot of really cool tools out there to to help the whole process, and it's just figuring out
Mhm.
what works best for you and your
Well,
business.
I think it's actually so important to, before you even consider your strategy, to think about your process, because you want to make sure that the second you have that idea that's going to, do the next best thing for your business, that you're able to implement it. I think that is honestly a big mistake that a lot of people do. They worry about the process after, and it becomes a hindrance to the level of production and productivity that you can take on your show. And I really feel like, these tools and some of these systems that you may have in place, they're meant to be there for you so you can focus on what really matters at the end of the day, which is the strategy, the growth, and the overall audience connection that you want to have. And that's just another novice mistake I see, is we're hyper focused on equipment and tools and all these things, but it's like, start with what you have, get a great system in place. If you don't want to work with another agency or whatever, have a content buddy, someone that can keep you accountable, and just start that way. Start small, but better than with nothing at all is kind of what I want to say.
Yeah, because and that's something as companies I've worked with, it's like, okay, we're like, it feels like everything is ad hoc. Like it's just
Mhm.
like, okay, we're recording. Okay, now
Yeah.
it's but it's one of those balance things. Like you can do a whole lot with like a Notion, with Notion,
Right.
with like a Google Sheets or Google Doc, even to begin tracking and sharing information. I mean, you don't have to even go into something as complicated as like Monday.com or any of those huge
Mhm.
systems. I mean, if you have one, ideally it can roll into that and make it, if you're
Right.
normally, if that's where you normally work,
Mhm.
please don't go get one of those just for this. That
Yes.
you won't do anything.
Yes.
But really it's the systems and the process. And if you get that streamlined, you can save a ton of time.
Well, like another analogy is roller coasters are built a certain way. They have a framing to them. And then once the framing and the, kind of mechanics of them are built out, then you're going to go in and add the theming and add the ambiance and add this and that and whatever. But without that strong frame and making sure that it's always going to go, it doesn't matter what kind of thing it's going to be. It's going to fall apart. And a lot of podcasts fall apart because they don't have that structure already set up. So while I am the fruit creative, I also strongly believe in that process and that consistency and the level of communication required in order to make sure that your podcast doesn't stop after episode 7 and hopefully continues on as long as you need it to.
Yeah, I think it is. I think you really have to get a feel for it up front. It's like, this is a commitment. We can mitigate some of the time, but we got to have things in place first. And if you get them in first, it becomes much more fun.
Yes.
It's not the slog.
Like, let's get rid of all that other stuff first. Let's get the mechanics out. And all right, now let's have some fun.
Yeah, because like going back later, like it's like remodeling anything. It's just
Yes.
not
Yes.
nearly as pleasant. Not nearly as
Yes.
pleasant. So as people, maybe as they're out there, they're thinking, okay, I've got a B2B podcast, we got it. So what? I'm not doing anything with it. Maybe companies are thinking about launching it. I think the big difference with B2B versus even like B2C versus more entertainment focused podcasts is really this idea of, hey, we're doing this because we want to actually generate leads. Like,
Yes.
Hey, we're not doing it. I mean, yes, we want it to be an enjoyable, we want the experience, but we kind of like to get some people buying our stuff from this. So,
Yeah.
what's like, how do you, what's one way that you see people really doing this well? Because I got to believe there's a lot of people out there be like, that sounds great.
Yes.
What do I do?
Yes, I'm so happy you asked that question because it is one of the few tools or methods, rather, for content creation where you can directly relate an individual to a sale, essentially. So, this is again only specific to B2B, but let's say you are an agency and you specialize in like digital marketing and ads and whatever, and you have a podcast. Now, every guest that you have on your show can be interesting thought leaders, but also they could be your potential clients if you really want them to be. And I think the people that are doing it well are not recording the episode, sending a graphic after, and then just ghosting. They are continuing the conversation. They are funneling them into other give opportunities that create win-wins for both party that can hopefully be an easy and natural organic transition to a discovery call. Like, hey, actually, I've loved working with you on X, Y, and Z. Actually, we need some help with some of the stuff we're doing. And we've had such a great experience, keyword experience so far. So let's explore what it could be like to continue the process in another capacity, right? So it's not just, okay, we posted the episode, we tagged them. It's really being the advocate for them and helping them make it as easy as possible. So what we do is we send them a Notion page after the episode is done, and we kind of curate the different pieces of content. So we'll send the YouTube link, we'll send the audio player link, we'll send the graphics, we'll send the clips, but then we will also provide examples of the copy that should go with those posts so that they have one less thing to think about and they can copy and paste. And the reason why it's beneficial to be all on one Notion page instead of just a Google Drive link is now that CEO or leader or whoever can copy that link and send it to a social media coordinator who knows exactly what to do with that content and continue the process on their behalf. Something else is a couple weeks after you've recorded the episode, send them a thank you gift. They gave knowledge, they gave time, they gave energy. They don't have to necessarily be paid for their time, but whatever is reasonable for your budget, send them a small thank you gift. But bonus points if it's something that stays on their desk, because you want it to be very present and visible so that every time they look at their desk, they are thinking of you one way or another. So I've done small things where I've gotten a pen engraved and like inside was a quote that the guest said from the episode or something. I've gotten a shirt made with like their name on it and like, something that they like or whatever. So it's not just giving a gift. It is whatever is in your budget, but also personalizing that gift, putting their name on it. That is triggering something in their brain. It's a dopamine thing. Like, oh, they put my name on it. They're liking you now. It's a psychological thing, right? So that's part of the experience. I'm taking that from Disney. Everything is super customized there. They throw your name on everything and make you feel like you're a king or a queen, right? So that's one small way. Okay, gift aside, a week after that, you want to ask them, hey, I would love if you would be a featured author on my blog. We're writing a blog about X, Y, or Z. We'll give each other backlinks, whatever. And I'm sure the AI process people out there, I've seen it happen, where can figure out to where they have this form that they can fill out, give it some answers, and then it'll generate the blog post for them, basically. So now we're not just saying, okay, I did an interview with you. Here's a gift. Now will you love me and be my customer? Because that feels so inauthentic to give somebody something and go, well, now let's be friends. And do you want to buy my services? So that's the other thing. It's like really pacing it out, right? So, okay, now you have the blog. That was an easy thing. You got a little bit of a backlink. Now, other people from their side of the world are really starting to see what you're doing, which could be a potential for a referral. And then lastly is either trying to see and connect with that person to see if they're going to be at a convention or a conference that you're going to be at, or if there's a webinar that they may be of interest in, and inviting them to that. So you want to invite them to something that feels like it's going to give them value. They engage in that. And that moment right after that, that's when you say, hey, I've been really enjoying, getting to know each other. And, we made some content together. And, who do you know that you think might be interested in what we're doing? So once you say, who do you know, again, you're not kind of like coming out with the guns being like, are you ready to be my customer now? Do you love me yet? It's kind of, this is the thing I learned from this phrase I learned from Chris Decker at Salescast. Now it's now called Creative Spark, but he taught me that. And it's such a great question because the who do you know is, maybe they might think, well, I don't know, maybe I need something. And again, psychology. So whether or not they become your customer or a close referral of them might become a customer, you have some way to write down and target, okay, this is what we're trying to do. This is our sales process. And this is something that is repeatable. It is something that is consistent. We are also going to ask questions during the interview that are kind of insightful for our sales discovery process. We might kind of, throw in a question or two that helps us figure out our ideal target customers better to help us with other initiatives. But at the end of the day, it's a lot easier than just printing out a piece of paper with phone numbers and names on it and going, hi, my name is blah, blah, blah. We have a digital marketing service. Would you be interested in click? So that's exactly what I think the process is and why the ones that are doing it well, how they're excelling.
I love that because that so much gets focused on getting to the recording, and then you send the recording out, and that's like, it feels like it's done. But really, that just moves from your process, it moves into sort of the next phase of follow up and conversations. It's truly the long game.
Right. I mean, if you look at the statistics for the sales process for the B2B sales cycle, it's anywhere from 6 to 12 months. So why would you expect, oh, I'm done with an interview now. Like, wow, they love me so much. I'm so cool. They're going to be my customer now. You know what I mean? I don't know. And like you said, when you do the interview, you're not done. You've only just started. That is the beginning.
It is because suddenly you build trust, you have that conversation, they get to know you, you get to know them a little bit, then you can have those follow-up interactions. And really, the goal, for me is always, how can a year from now I still be in contact with this person? And maybe they don't buy it. That's okay. But you know what?
Yeah.
Maybe I can send business their way. Suddenly they can send it. It's that relationship that, as opposed to very much a transactional experience.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just like we used to be able to, not be able to, but old sales tactics in that regard, you'd go on dinner with somebody or you'd buy them a drink or, go to the golf course with them. And those are still effective things, but they're not as possible now with how big our world is. So just podcasting is the most affordable and reasonable way to get to that type of a feeling without actually having to do those things.
Yeah. And it's fascinating too, as you start, as businesses start really thinking through this, because suddenly you don't have to have your marketing department do the podcast. Like if you have just some engaging people, honestly, sales teams ought to have podcasts. They really 100%. Should. Because who in the world better?
Right. And you said something important there I want to double down on and highlight, which is your marketing department does not have to be the one to do the podcast. If anything, it's more important that they are not the ones doing the podcast, because there are supplemental pieces of content and campaigns that need to be run in order to make the podcast that much more effective, because the organic reach and presence is very high and very likely, but every now and then you might need paid ad campaigns to help you with your show. You might might need a newsletter made. You might need a webinar addendum set up. You might need X, Y, and Z. The list goes on and on. We should not be expecting our podcast producers to be an entire marketing department. And that is something that needs to be explained, because the shift seems to be in B2B, going back to your other question, that it is that way. Like, oh, we're just going to do a podcast and that's it. We won't need to do anything else. You could, but it may not be as effective as if you had baked it into the entire fold of what you are doing.
Yeah, that's the thing, is making it a part of the bigger picture. Foundational piece doesn't have to be the only thing, but you can do so much with any given episode. And even
Right.
like, especially I've been going down, the last few weeks, this rabbit trail with sales teams, is how can you, from sales enablement, helping sales with their content,
Right.
it's like getting it out of marketing can really help. And like you say, if you can get it out of marketing, suddenly you have a process doc like your Notion doc, and it's like, oh, but I can give this to marketing.
Yes.
And then like with sales or with other groups, they then have the opportunity to speak with people in the field who might not be their normal customers, and they can learn, like, because that's what salespeople want to do, right? They just want, put a salesperson in a room with potential customers and they will have conversations all day. And,
Yes.
and that's what I think podcasts really have an advantage for them.
Yes. And last thing to touch on with that is there are different ways to format your podcast to meet whatever goal is within your company. So we talked a lot about interview style, but you said sales enablement. Your podcast could be educational to teach about the aspects of a product or service that you have that your customers might benefit from hearing. But also your team would be able to use as well to help with their sales pitches. So for example, HubSpot, all of the content that they have teaching people how to do X, Y, and Z, like on their platform and other platforms too. It not only acts as a win for the potential buyer, but it also acts as a win for training and content for the sales team as well too. So I would encourage people to think creatively about how the podcast can improve whatever initiative that you have. Another really great one is recruiting effort too. So if you have a company that has a really bad presence as far as like lifelessness, like we don't know what it's like to work there, we have no idea what's going on, having an internal podcast can be equally as successful, because people can start to get a feel for, oh wow, there's like people working here, and they this is behind the scenes, this is a day in their life, X, Y, and Z. So I think that's the last thing to tie up as it relates to what's changing with podcasting and B2B is it's not only one-on-one types of conversations and stories in that way, but it's a broader story that meets the initiatives that you're really trying to reach for your brand, an addendum to whatever sales targets that you have.
Yeah, I love, and the internal podcast, you can do so much with that, just because, like, especially if you're part of a large company, it's boring. I don't know.
Yes.
Most of
Yes.
it, like once you clear about 1,000 people, let alone you get 3,000 people, your company's boring. Like
Yeah.
it's just,
It just happens. It's not intentional, but it can happen.
it does. And so having something that brings an experience, that brings some life, that suddenly, I don't know, becomes almost memeable, right?
Yes.
It's like,
Yes, exactly.
so, it's one of those where to make it engaging, I love that. And something I've been, working on as well, this idea of objection handling, even for sales, and trying to, talk with sales teams, like, okay, what are, like, I could ask sales teams, like, give me your top 5 to 10 objections that you hear. And like, everybody could rattle them off. Okay. So why don't you just create like a 2 or 3 minute episode and just talk about your objection, dump it in a playlist, send it on out. Like, you're really only limited truly by your imagination on what you can do.
Yes. And by your legal team too.
Oh yeah.
So,
Yeah. Legal always, man, they are such a wet blanket. Like, they are such a wet blanket. We need them, but
we have empathy for that too.
I know, man, they are. Yeah. You gotta incorporate legal. Make sure we're good on that. So I got to ask real quick about the Bippity Boppity Business podcast. So what is that besides such a fantastic name?
Yes. So the show is basically concepts that Disney excels at, like storytelling, branding, immersive experiences, and customer engagement that I find to be very fascinating. And I explore those theories and those ideas through various interviews on the show. So we've had people that have worked for Disney prior on the show, like the former VP of operations for Walt Disney World was on the show. That was a phenomenal episode. He talked about leadership and growing the company and all sorts of things. That all the way from a gentleman who has an automotive shop who uses Disney's theories and concepts in growing his business. So I think it's a little bit of a blend of a lot of things. It's a passion project that turned into something that I love now. But at its core, it's about creating content that is accessible to understand and helping business leaders know that, those things are possible for your business. Here's just a rough example. The other day I saw this new company on Instagram, these two young female CEOs. They founded this company. It's a pickle company. They make pickles. That's all they do. They make pickles. And they have such a cult following where it's like people are going out and buying these pickles. And guess what? It's because they didn't make it about the pickles. They made it about their journey of making the pickles. They made a little pickle mascot. They made giveaways. They made experiences with the pickle, pop-up pickle moments, like all these things, right? Guess what? That's basically what great brands do, not just Disney, but Nike, Apple, all these brands. They take a thing that is otherwise lifeless and they breathe life into it, and they make people into super fans. And selfishly, I'd love to know how to create a super fan cult like following for my business, wouldn't you? Right?
Absolutely. Like, I'm game. Like, if you figure it out, like, I'm all ears.
Right.
But you're right. It's like, it's a pickle, like, okay, but it's not about the pickle. It's all about everything else. Oh, and they sell pickles.
Right. Guess what? Same thing with B2B. I get a lot of gripe for it's not a B2B podcast. Guess what? You sell software. Guess what? It's software. It's a pickle. Like, what's going to make it better?
It's a widget. It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, right.
Nobody cares. Like, you can't, like, if I put your logo and what you do, I can line up 20 companies just like yours.
Exactly. So what's going to make it different and special and be memorable? Something that I have been personally trying to reflect and focus on and improve is stories versus legends, right? Mm-hmm. Even legends are forever. They're passed down. They're honored, they're respected. They transcend the time of just a short period of time. So when you create stories that are legendary, that's what you want for your brand. Disney's has been around for 100 whatever years. They've turned their story into a legend. There's lore behind it. There's depth. There's weight behind it. That's what we need to be doing for our brands, especially in B2B, because they need it the most. It is so and much so needed. And the funny thing is once you go 2 steps behind and look at it from the macro, it's very possible, because at the end of the day, businesses are people doing things for other people. So think about it like that and try to infuse that into just the way you think about your content, and it should be really helpful.
I love it. As we wrap up, any last takeaway you want to leave the audience with?
Yes, I want to leave you with encouragement. This is a podcasting content, whatever it is, when it comes to marketing, it is a long-term play, and it can feel tiresome. It can feel a little overwhelming at times, but I can assure you that if you make at least one piece of content a day, whether it's a 2-sentence post on LinkedIn or taking a picture that you're going to use for later, you're going to thank yourself. No one else is going to promote your brand but you. You're the only one that can make your content dreams come true. But if you need a fairy godmother every now and then to help you, I am here.
I love that. But you're right. It is a long game. And so starting out with that in mind, it's going to save you a lot of stress and headaches.
It's okay. Listen, the first video, if you've heard of Gary Vee or watched him, his first video versus what his videos look like now are completely different. Everybody stinks in the beginning, and it's okay.
But you have to do like the first 2 dozen, 50 episodes.
Yes.
You have to go through that in order to get better.
Yes, you have to. There's no way around it. I can't wave the magic wand and make you do the interview for you, so that's on you, right?
I'm serious. Like I wish I'd turn the pumpkin into the
Yes,
carriage. Like
yes,
it doesn't work. It's always
yes,
midnight at the beginning,
yes,
right?
yes, 100%. I love that. That's such a great analogy. That's so
Oh,
fun.
Rita, if people want to know more about you, more about your business podcast, where do you want them to go?
Yeah, just look me up on LinkedIn. My first and last name is Rita Richa, or you can look up Reignite Media. We're everywhere. But, if you want to have some fun and hang out in podcast land, Bippity Boppity Business, it's everywhere on all the platforms. Go check it out.
Awesome. So if you are listening to this, we will drop all that in the show notes. If you're watching it live, connect with Rita on LinkedIn. Definitely connect with me as well. Would love to chat. Rita, this has been a blast. This has been a lot of fun. I learned a ton.
Yay.
And thanks for joining me today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Eric.